That was so cool. That was the Divine Hand
Favorite Zappa
Ensemble.
song.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. So Divine Hand Ensemble, we have Mano Divina here with us to talk about his music. Obviously, that was a Frank Zappa cover, but the Divine Hand Ensemble. This is from the first track off of their album Aria 51, and just Mono, if you don't mind a little bit of my introductory bloviating, I met I met Andy Zicklin at the Moon June Music Festival in
Oh, right
Spain.
on. I love Moon Dune.
Yeah, so he said, "Oh, your channel, Make Word Music. I've got a guy you need to talk to." And I was like, "Oh yeah," and he goes, "Yeah, he did a Theremin cover of Peaches and Regalia by Frank Zappa," and I was like, "Yep."
Yeah. Did that qualify? Am I weird enough?
Yeah, so tell us, what's your whole story? Like how did this end up happening?
Sure. So, weird is the name of the game here in everything that we have to discuss. So, first of all, so obviously that was Frank Zappa cover. All my life, I wanted to be in a band and have my own group that was good enough to play a Frank Zappa piece. So, when it came time to record our debut album, which is Aria 51, I wanted to start it off with Peaches and Regalia because that's my favorite Zappa piece, and I'm a Zappaholic. I love all of it. So, uh, we cut it and we started off with just that. And we got signed to Label 51, recorded the entire album, and the album is the Theremin interpreting songs from all different genres and backgrounds, but as a lead singer, as a diva. I call it singing electricity because essentially, instead of just playing the usual swooping type of Beach Boy-esque melody that most people are familiar with that a theremin can do. I'm trying to more emulate the vocals of songs. For example, on the album we do Wild as the Wind. It's a song by Johnny Mathis, by Nina Simone, and by David Bowie. In this particular version, it's the David Bowie version. I'm emulating every syllable, breath, and nuance he does with his vocals. I'm just doing it with notes, not with syllables. So if you were to sing along knowing the memorized version of how he sang it on the Station to Station album, you would see that I'm matching it exactly because that's the approach I'm trying to take with the theremin as a diva, as the lead singer of a group. So I believe we're the only theremin fronted performing ensemble out there. I know there have been others in history, like Lothar and the Hand People and everything. We specialize as the Divine Hand Ensemble in classical music, but so much more than that. The theremin's got a history of being weird and spooky. So we're loaded with everything from Danny Elfman scores and horror movie music to opera arias where it sounds angelic and heaven-like to rock covers, to Disney songs, to popular favorites. We try to do a little bit of everything. We've recorded tangos. We're about to record an entire album of Zappa, but more on that later. So we're able to cross all these genres effortlessly with just by putting the theremin out front as a diva. It's hard for a band to kind of jump around and do those different genres and pop up in those different type of fields without alienating their audience. But when it's just a theremin as a lead singer, it functions more as like a Linda Ronstadt thing, like what's she gonna do next? So uh that's how Aria 51 came together, and obviously Peaches and Regalia needed to start off the entire shebang. Now, the title, obviously.
If you don't mind the interruption,
No,
so
not at all.
I don't want to just assume everyone. I mean, I know I have a pretty intelligent audience, and they probably know what the
Yeah.
theremin is. But you're doing this kind of weird stuff with your hands, and then we see sound. Like, could you just give a very brief overview of a theremin?
So, that's a good point. I mean, there once was a time where every interview I did, I wouldn't think of doing anything but starting off explaining it because no one knew what it was. But it's made so many more advances in popular culture with The Simpsons and The Big Bang Theory that I forget that there are still people that don't understand how this instrument works. This instrument has been around for 100 years, actually over 100 years. It is the world's only instrument in the world that you play without touching. It is the world's first space-controlled instrument. It captures electricity in the air between two antennas. I am essentially vibrating the molecules that are electrified in the air till they vibrate to a corresponding musical pitch. And then I'm doing that to play it like an instrument. I'm vibrating the air molecules from note to note, from interval to interval, and making it sing or have a tone or a voice. And that's what my right hand is doing. It's weird to watch because as the right hand goes closer to the antenna, it gets higher in pitch. The left hand's the exact opposite. As it gets closer to the antenna, it goes lower in volume. It's just volume. So my left hand is kind of picking out the syllables of the phrase, while my right hand is doing the notes of it. And you just stand there pulling music out of the ether, literally playing electrified air and making it sing. This instrument's been around for almost 100 years. There's all kinds of great information on it. There's a great book called Theremin Espionage that I recommend a lot. Has a whole history of the instrument, which has a whole fascinating history with the world wars and secret agent stuff and all kinds of great espionage tales that go with that. But for our purposes, we wanted to bring it back to the stage as a performing instrument. It was very popular in the 20s, disappeared for a while, then it came back as a novelty instrument. Beach Boys, of course, made it famous with Good Vibrations again. Then it became back to horror movies and Aliens and Scooby-Doo, and then people started to bring it back into music again. So we wanted to put it out front as a singer. So for you folks who don't know what a theremin is, I highly recommend learning a bit more about this fascinating instrument. People don't believe it's real. When they first premiered it in different places like Paris, people rioted. People didn't believe that any of this. You got to remember too, we're looking at an age that just discovered electricity and wires, looking at a wireless instrument. Today, it's kind of commonplace with our acceptance of wireless technology. But yeah, so that's how we got to the theremin. I played a bunch of other instruments. I fell in love with the theremin. I wanted to put together my own ensemble to back me so I could use it as a lead singer, and hence that's how we became the Divine Hand Ensemble.
So one person that comes to mind who has I've watched a bunch of her content, Carolina Ike, out of Germany. She's played a lot
Absolutely
of really
wonderful.
yes, and she's played a lot of very interesting music, and she's got some great videos explaining like the hand shapes, but like what does the shape have to do with the notes? And I'm sorry to go deep into the theremin here, but like when someone's watching that Peaches video, you're doing these. It's not just moving your hand around. It's like creating shapes. You're doing more than just like okay, this note here. It's not like these virtual dials in the air. What's going on?
No, that's actually a great question because that is how somebody would see the video. Okay, so let's go back to uh the shapes themselves don't necessarily make the music you're hearing. They are the after effect of the proximity of your hand to the antennas. So thereminists have different approaches. Some people come to the side, some people play like this, some people do the standard Claire Rockmore cello fingering method, turn sideways. I've seen other people play their own ways. I've seen different people have different approaches with and they all result in different shapes that you make when you're doing it. Due to the way I play, my hands make really weird shapes. I have a volume thing with my hand that I don't see many other theremin players do because I'm usually playing opera arias. That's how I started. So it was always over enunciating each syllable. So I just developed a habit of high picking with my left hand on the volume. Now, if you were to, the closer you get to the antenna is where your note is. So no matter how you hold your hand, you're going to get that note. It's the intervals that you go to get to the following notes that are going to create the shapes that you're seeing. Now, if you think about that and you watch the video for Peaches, in the middle of Peaches, I take Frank's guitar solo, and I play it on a theremin and you can clearly see how my right hand is doing what would be on a guitar neck, and my left hand is doing what would be on a guitar by the pickup, by the strum guard, and you can actually see me playing the solo, but now I'm up in the air and reversed. That's a good way to kind of put together how does the hands go with the sound and how does it work that way.
So in Peaches, that is quintuplets. Like how much fidelity do you have in terms of speed? Because I noticed there's no theremin in the it's
Right,
like
correct,
can
correct.
you get that precise? Can you play that quickly? This is very precise music, and so I'm just curious, like when you're arranging this for theremin, how much goes into like what is physically possible on the instrument?
So technically, all of that is possible, but that doesn't mean you should do it because the margin of error is huge. The theremin is not the most precise instrument to begin with. You are essentially playing air, and air is always in motion. So the best approach you can get is when I do a piece and I figure out what the theremin's going to do, or I talk to our arrangers about what the theremin's going to do, I tell them where I can't play. Now that fast passage you mentioned there, it would be nearly impossible. It could be done. It would take years to perfect, and it wouldn't sound that good because it's not, you can't precisely pluck that out. So my number one goal is if I can't play it live on stage, I don't want to play it in the studio. I practiced Zappa's guitar solo for like a year before I cut it live, and I still warm up every day to it so that when we play it live, because now the group's playing Peaches faster. But it's just one of those things you have to. If I can't play it live, I don't want to make the theremin do it just because I'm in the studio and I can.
Can you tell us a little about the song selection criteria? And obviously, as a Zappa head, it's like, does humor belong in music? This album is called Aria 51. I know there's like some cheeky humor throughout the album. There's some funny sounds. And we even heard in Peaches, like the squealing pigs, whatever that thing
That's
is. But
correct. The honky hogs.
yeah, that's right.
They're the honky hogs. I have a whole collection of honky hogs, all in different pitches, and my group absolutely hate me for it. Seriously, I've had them throw them out, hide them, burn them, lose them at shows, and I just keep getting more and more honky hogs. So I if I had had my way, they would have been on every song on the album. But of course, very few people appreciate my honky hugging expertise and skill. So we just put them in Peaches because they seem to make a little more sense there.
Okay, and
Oh,
then
they're in Ghost Town too.
yes, that's right. And Ghost Town is actually the next song I wanted to play. Um, but yeah, could you talk a little bit about song selection and arrangement and how that works? And how do you plan for sort of a chamber orchestra led by a theremin?
So I'll hear a song and I'll hear it in our voicing. The other day, I was listening to one of my favorite musicals, Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I'm listening to science fiction, and I was like, "Oh my God, I can hear our voicings. I hear harps doing this part, pianos doing that part, the theremin doing that part." So a song grabs me like that. Can I hear us doing it? The group is called the Divine Hand because I love beautiful music. So if it's a beautiful song, I want to consider doing it. I have a sense of humor, so if it's a fun song or a funny song, I want to consider doing it. Or if it's something that I just think our voicings fit great with. I'm a big fan of movie score and stuff like that. Like for example, we do the Edward Scissorhands theme because it's just we have two percussionists, two harps, we have a five-piece string section. We just have the right voicings for that, and then I do the creepy little kids choir with the theremin. But so when it comes to choosing the selections, we have all these different shows, right? One was just all classical, one's all opera, one was like cover songs, one was popular favorites, one was movie scores, and that's how we would get our work. We would just play thematic shows like that. So when it came time to do the album, I wanted to pick, something from every genre. So we did there's Zappa on there, there's Queen on there, and there's Bowie on there. There's the prog rock Italian band called Goblin, who's one of my favorite bands growing up, and we have a song by them on there. We have Phantom of the Opera because it's my favorite musical. We have La Vie en Rose because every time we play it, people really seem to respond strongly to that. I wanted to have one that we just never played before, and that was the Disney song. We just came into the studio and did that blank. The title track is my opera aria showcase of when people say, "What do you mean you want to play the theremin like an opera singer?" I That's my showcase, so I show them that. And then of course, Specials, one of my favorite bands. So we kind of did Ghost Town on a dare originally. So there's some kind of history that goes with this. So the group's debut is Halloween. October 31st, we made our official debut in 2010. And there's a documentary about that was filmed here in Philadelphia called 21st Century Classical Music. And it's available on our website at divinehand.net. And it's about our first year together. And we would have these moments. We wanted to present ourselves different than every other classical group out there. I never liked that big stuffy wall between the audience and the performers that is in so many classical performances where the music was washed over the audience like a giant beautiful bird, and then the performer and the audience were so separated by not being together in that moment. And I always felt that that was wrong, and you don't see that in rock. Well, at least when they're not prancing and preening all over the stage, there are some artists that really know how to bring places as big as like a coliseum into a united moment of playing. And I always felt um, we should do something as a classical group to break as many rules of what you expect a classical group to do. So once a show, we do something called Live Without a Net. We still do it, where nowadays we have people vote online or give suggestions online, where people will suggest things that a classical group shouldn't do, and then give us the challenge in order to do it. So for the first debut we did, we had Barry Manilow's Magic was, how do you do Barry Manilow's disco song Magic with a classical group? And then on top of it, it's the same chords as a Chopin piece. So we Live Without a Net had the challenge of playing Chopin and turning it into and the Barry Manilow song, and we pulled it off. And then the next year we came back to that same theater for Halloween, and it was being filmed, and we were like, well, how do we top that? And we decided, the one thing that most classical groups are never going to play is reggae. So we started to play Ghost Town just for that show on a dare. And we improved our way through it with solos. And at the end of it, when we were watching the film in the editing room, we just fell in love with it. And we've closed every show we've ever done with it since. Now we're like 14 years old.
Yeah, I don't remember if like where the solo is, but I think there's a flute solo in this that is
Yep,
just a killer solo. But yeah, let's
it
let's
is.
take a
He's
listen.
great.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to get into the
That's
next
right.
music segment. All right, here we go.
I had our guests take solos, and that was one of our guests.
I'm gonna skip ahead to that flute solo if I can find it.
Sure. You want to get probably a couple minutes from here.
Okay. it's just such a cool track, and you guys did such a good job with it. I'm I was
Thank
listening
you.
to the album today a couple of times to prep for this, and it's so impressive. I don't know. Are you familiar with Igudisman and Ju?
No.
Oh, it's a classical music duo. I interviewed Hyung Ki Ju. It's a Korean pianist and a Russian violinist, and all of their stuff is humorous. Like they're
Oh,
top notch, incredible musicians from the Yehudi Menuhin school, and they've done a lot of work with like John Malkovich, Billy Joel, and a lot of these other kind of interesting
sounds up
artists.
my alley.
Yeah, I think you would love it. But they talked when I interviewed Hyung Ki. He talked about that barrier in classical music where people don't solo, they don't improvise, they don't interact with the audience or engage, except you may now applaud, now that I've finished
Yeah.
performing.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us more about, how do people in this rather, I don't want to make huge assumptions, but in this rather stuffy world of classical music, how is theremin led chamber orchestra music, how does that land?
Okay, so it's weird that the classical people think we're just way too crazy and weird, and the crazy and weird people think we're way too classical, and everyone else just thinks we're spooky. So it's kind of hard to. So a lot of people think we're religious because of the name, because we do a lot of really beautiful music. We
Oh,
do
like woo
Mozart's
woo kind of
Lacrimosa.
stuff?
Yeah, but they hear us doing Mozart's Lacrimosa, so they know it's not voodoo, but they also get the idea of, oh, well, divine hand, and it's never been done before, so people don't know what to make of it. And we don't give you just one thing. Like if we were just doing reggae songs in an orchestra or just doing Zappa songs in an orchestra, that'd be one thing, but we do everything. So it's hard for people to pin down what show they saw and what group they saw and how they felt about that. If you're a Mozart fan and you watch us do a Bowie tribute during the Philly Loves Bowie week, you might not have loved what we did, or you might have really thought it was great that a classical band got up there and did classical renditions of Bowie songs. So we do try to be as weird as possible since it's going to be weirdly construed anyway. No one knows what to make of it. The idea is come and hear beautiful music and watch a theremin player because for 100 years, a lot of people couldn't do that. It was, something you could go back in the day to Carnegie Hall and see theremin players play all the time, various repertoires. But nowadays, that's not so common. So we invite people to our shows to, you'll hear something you like. We play such a wide variety. Like when it came to choosing the music for RE51, I wanted to show this is some of all of what we do. And we went in after that, we've recorded an album of Piazzolla tangos, authentic South American tangos by one of my favorite composers, Astor Piazzolla, who obviously did not write theremin parts. So we had to write our own theremin parts in, and we're about to do an all Zappa record.
I was just going to ask, tell us about the Zappa record.
Okay, so I have two arrangers in my group, two excellent arrangers. I have John Salmon, who did all the arranging on the RE51 album, and I have Dave Hartle, who did the arranging for the Piazzolas and the Zappa stuff, including the Peaches video that we started off with today. And we did the Peaches video as our first single from the album, and everybody liked it so much that it just eventually got wind all around that, hey, these guys do Zappa. Do you do any more Zappa? Which was like a complete joke. It was like, do we do any more Zappa? Well, it just so happens we have about a 2 hour Zappa show. When would you like it? How would you like
Wow.
it? Alphabetically, chronologically? Yeah. So we started talking to the label, and the label said, look, we think this is a good idea. Let's go ahead and record an album. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something because it's us. We're going to try to do something a little bit different and yet still true to the factor. The idea here is to celebrate Zappa as a composer. We're doing he was a great American composer. Some people just know his comedy rock. Some people know his serious classical compositions, but a lot of people don't get to hear how great some of his compositional melodies were when you hear them in context of a rock band with funny lyrics, as opposed to when you hear them instrumentally redone by a string quartet or something of the sort. So we decided to do an album to pay tribute to him as a composer, but yet, like you said about the wall and the playing for an audience, we also wanted to perform like a band because we are a band and like a Zappa band. So we're going to have improv solos throughout the pieces, just like we'll be changing them as we do it live each time. But we're also rehearsing the actual compositions as they are. And like Zappa, no one knows when they're going to be made to solo. I have the giant honky hog of doom, and if I pointed at you and honk, you're up for a solo, whether you've got one or not, or something evil.
Okay, so let me just maybe ask for some spoilers. Can we get any hints on some of the songs to expect on this next track or this next album?
Absolutely. So, uh, with the Piazzolla stuff, it was songs everyone would know who was a Piazzolla fan. But with the Zappa fan, you can't just do that because there isn't like just 10 songs everyone would know. And if there are, those certainly aren't the ones that would lend themselves to the voicings of my group. So I went ahead with my Rangers and my players, and we picked all of our favorites. Now I'm a lifelong Zappa fan. My Rangers are lifelong Zappa fans, and I got a few players that are lifelong Zappa fans. Obviously, my percussionist Randy. So I went through by picking some of my favorites that I knew were going to work. So let's see. I can tell you that we have a wicked, challenging version of Redunzel.
Hmm.
We do an entire medley of the Uncle Meat album, the whole, all four sides, ending with King Kong and everything, in
Wow.
which, like Ghost Town, there's solos, including flute and steel drum, and some of the odd guests we have as instrumentalists coming on to play with us. Let me think. I'll give you.
I
We
saw
have.
your friends with Robbie Mangano on Facebook. I don't know, is he, a guest? He's my favorite Zappa guitar player out there.
We He is a great Zappa guitar player. We were purposely trying to stay away from guitar because one of the things we're trying to do with this album is to present the theremin in place of Frank's guitar.
Ah,
Because the one thing you always hear in Zappa's music is guitar because Frank was a guitar player. So we were trying to replace that. As you hear in Peaches, the theremin is actually playing all the guitar parts there, which brings me back full circle to something that I'm glad I remembered to mention to you. So you were playing Peaches here at the beginning of your show, and I was listening to it coming from your studio through my speakers. I've heard Peaches a million times, our version of Peaches. That was the very first time I ever got to clearly hear the staccato whammy thing that I'm doing in the beginning of the song, which is what Zappa did on his guitar. And we had a hard time mixing it because it just got eaten up by everything, no matter what. It's not just do, 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 it's more stuttered. Do, 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 do. And I never ever hear it, not even on my own stereo. And the minute it kicked in, I said, oh, look, there it is for the first time. So thanks for letting me hear myself.
you know, I have to say, in the times I listened to it and over the last couple of weeks, that was the one thing that stood out. I was like, there's this pulsing going on. What, because you familiar, like I play the song on guitar.
Right. So you know how it's supposed to go.
Yeah, and then I was like, "Oh, that's interesting that there's this quarter note pulsing kind of thing happening. Is that part of the arrangement? Is it were they doing it with the mallets? It's hard to tell, what's happening, but yeah, I did notice it. It's funny that you didn't.
No, I never get to hear it. I put it there intentionally, but I never actually, my ears never pick it out. But I heard it clearly tonight. And that's what we're trying to do with making the theremin as interesting as Frank's guitar while paying tribute to his compositional skills.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people could pay tribute to his guitar playing, but we don't even have a guitar player in the group. So we thought we'd kind of take a different approach. That's why we're doing some pieces like Strictly Gentile and Sofa Number Two.
Mm.
They
I
lend
thought
themselves to a more orchestral feel without it turning into the LSO stuff.
I thought I did hear some guitar on the album, and there is from Darla Rubleski, but
Oh, yes, on Aria 51. Yes,
uh-huh.
she's our guest. We have a few guests. She played guitar on the Disney song for us because that song is so pretty and it needed some warmth. And Mark Adler was our flute playing guest, and the trumpet player is my friend from grade school. We've always been
Mm.
friends since grade school. He plays in a bunch of different bands, and when we came to record the album, I was like, "You got to come play." He's like, "What am I gonna do?" I was like, well, for one thing, you're going to play on Ghost Town and then maybe a muted solo in Wild as the Wind. And he was there like the next day.
That's
One of my
cool.
favorite.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. What is the URL? Where do people find the music to purchase it? How do they follow you? All that stuff.
Okay, so let's give you the whole spiel. So the album is Aria 51, And that and future albums will be available from Label 51 Recordings at label51recordings.com. That's the label's address. Ours is divinehand.net, and that has our videos as well as our merchandise, as well as information about the group. You can learn about the players. You can get a look at us. You can see a bit of our history. You can learn about some of the other stuff we did. And our videos are on that, as well as our YouTube channel, which is Divine Hand Ensemble. And the YouTube channel has videos broken down into four categories. One is weird. That's everything you wouldn't expect a classical group to do. One is wonderful. That's all the stuff you could play for your grandmother who would think it's pretty. One is woeful because we specialize in funerary music, actually music written for the dead. And the last is meanwhile for things that we can't explain what they are or how they fit. Like, for example, I once made my group meow their way through a Mozart piece, and we captured it and made a video of it because, it's funny and it's certainly not stuffy. But anyway, that's all in there. So go visit us at Divine Hand Ensemble on YouTube or divinehand.net for our website. Take a look at our videos, take a look at our albums, and see what you think of us.
Looks
Love
like
to hear
you're
from everyone.
awesome. Looks like you're also Divine Hand Ensemble on Instagram and Twitter.
Correct.
Cool. All right. So to wrap things up, let's choose something a little bit shorter. We've got the Nightingale and the Rose,
Now
or
that's just a solo theremin piece. What else did you have in mind?
let's see, Hushabye Mountain or Opera.
Eh, Opera's nice because it really it's a piece by Goblin, which is an Italian prog rock band used in the horror movie by Dario Argento called Opera. And of course, we reinterpreted it so that you would never know any of those things while staying true to the melody. It also is a nice way to show how the theremin works against strings. So
Okay.
maybe that's a good one to do. It's
I
got a short intro.
Okay, cool. And for anyone who does go and listen to this, or preferably buys it, the last track as a solo theremin track, it's impressive. And I'm not saying like you can't do impressive things on the theremin. I had just never heard some of these techniques before, and it is a pretty good showman type piece on the theremin. So check that one out.
Thank you.
Uh,
That's a duet that I turned into a solo piece by Rimsky-Korsakov called "The Nightingale and the Rose." It's supposed to be a bird and a rose singing about their love for one another, but I thought it too involved theremin techniques I never heard.
yeah, it was really beautiful. So nice work, Mano. Let's close with opera.
Thank you.